Ashley.
Hi, Lonnie. Well, thank you so much again for having us. I know that we had a different training plan for today, but we are filling in with Miss Christy Lindsay, and she's going to be going over some escrow red flags. We're going to go over some solar, some supplemental taxes. And as always, just keep it interactive. If you guys have questions, just go ahead and ask. And yeah, we'll just take it from there.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for having us. Like Ashley said, please interrupt as we go. I don't want to talk at you. I want you to ask me questions as we go. The first thing I wanted to talk about are some things that I see that tend to delay closings. And they're really simple things. So it might be a little bit, remedial for you, but first things first, when you open an escrow, if you could provide your escrow officer with the contact information for your buyer and seller, it's huge because first and foremost, we can directly reach out to the buyer with our wiring instructions so they can get their deposit in. We do also offer a mobile app. So we'll send all of that information directly to the buyer. And of course, we'll keep you CC'd on all of that, but that kind of takes something off your plate so you don't have to coordinate that whole process. And then with the sellers, we can reach out immediately and introduce ourselves and start obtaining the payoff information, the solar information, any HOA. So that's something I like to do right away because those days are precious and we don't want to waste any of them. So that I would say first and foremost is something that definitely will make all of our lives easier. We do send out an opening package to the buyer and the seller when escrow is opened. And it's really nice because they can just go through, this is all online. They click through some forms. For the sellers, it gives them an opportunity to look at the tax forms. So the 593 form, the 1099, and the sooner they look over those documents, if they need to consult with the CPA, maybe they're selling a rental property, it gives them the opportunity to do that right up front rather than when we're at the signing table and then surprise, you have to pay, a huge amount of taxes on this sale. We don't like that. So it allows for the sellers to review those things. And then for the buyers, one of the most important things in there is there's a guide on different ways of holding title. So a lot of times during the escrow process, the lender will come to us and say, hey, how do the buyers want to hold title? And if those buyers have filled out that opening patents, do they want to be joint tenants, community property? And if they have any questions about those different ways of holding title, they can contact us and we can go over those with the buyer so that they feel comfortable and they're making the right decision. So I love when we get the contact information and we can get those out because it truly does make the process a lot smoother. Of course, as soon as escrow is opened, the prelim is being worked on, and our prelim turnaround time is pretty quick. And I can always get them, within a day if we need them. But as soon as that comes out, we'll go over it. We're going to go over it line by line, and then this is where we're going to find out if there's any red flags. So the first thing I do is make sure that the person vested in the prelim is the person that signed the contract as the seller. And you'd be surprised. A lot of times I'll get contracts where the listing agent wasn't aware that the property was held in a trust. So we'll stop right there and we're going to need a copy of the trust. So my suggestion when you're, taking a listing, reach out to your title company, reach out to your escrow officer and review the vesting deed so that way you're prepared. If there's a trust, you can go to your listing appointment knowing that you're dealing with sellers that hold title in a trust, and you can request a copy of the trust at that time. So you can gather it all up and get it over to the title company to review. Usually it's pretty simple if your sellers are alive and well and they're the trustees of their trust. It's very straightforward. But of course, if you have a situation where maybe the original trustee has passed away, the sooner we can get all of that reviewed and advise what we'll need, maybe it's a death certificate, maybe they need to go down to the county and record or request a copy of a death certificate, which we can also help with. I just love to do all of that up front and not at the 11th hour. So as much information as you can gather, the better. And then same thing goes if you're dealing with a seller that's an LLC, a partnership, a corporation. We're always going to need to review those entity docs. So knowing upfront how your sellers hold title, if we can request those documents and get them in for review, get them approved by our title department, we're smooth sailing. So this goes for, a fully opened escrow with the buyer and also with a listing. If the sooner we can get all of those things in, the better. And then if we run into hiccups, which does happen, we can deal with them ahead of time. And then any questions about any of that? I know it seems very, probably remedial, like I said, but it's important and it really does slow things down. So any questions about any of that so far? Okay. Next, I want to talk about solar, our favorite thing. I would say probably, I don't know, it seems like 3 out of 5 of my escrows, they're solar. The thing is it's not one size fits all. So there's not one solution or one way to handle it, because of course it depends if the solar is owned, if it's leased. There's a different process for each thing. And to be perfectly honest with you, solar is a fairly new thing in the past couple of years. So the solar companies are not all on the same page. They don't all file the same thing against the property. And a lot of times they don't know what they're doing. So we kind of have to jump in and take charge of the process. So again, when you're taking a listing, if you're aware that there's solar on the property, gathering whatever paperwork or contract the seller has signed with the solar company is awesome, because what happens is when we're going to help, jump in and initiate the transfer process, we have all of that information. And usually if you have a buyer that is going to be assuming the solar, their lender needs to see a copy of the original contract that the seller signed. So that's very helpful. And another thing I'll mention is, again, all the solar companies aren't on the same page. So I will get sometimes escrows where there's nothing recorded against the property. So basically, if the agent didn't tell me there was solar, I would never know, because there's no lien recorded against the property. So as much information you can provide to the escrow officer about solar, the better, because, we're happy to jump in, make the calls, start the transfer, but if we don't know about the solar on the prelim, we would have no way of knowing. And oftentimes I'll find that it's not mentioned in the contract. Does this mean there's a question? Or she just saying hi?
I don't know. Lonnie, do you have a question?
I did. So I had a question about the solar. So if say that, like, there's a lien against the property for solar, but the solar company is no longer around, how would you, or where would you go for that information?
Oh, that's a great question. And that does happen. We'll do a little bit of research, a little investigative work to figure out what company took it over. Like, I believe Vivint was taken over by Sunrun. So we'll just go to their successor company, whoever took over those accounts, and initiate the process. So I've run into that situation, but I've never hit a brick wall. We've always been able to find a successor company to handle the transfer. That's a good question.
Thank you.
So, Christy, remember when
For
I
sure.
had that one, the solar was paid off and it was Peterson Dean,
Yes.
and the nightmare appraiser wanted something paperwork wise and there was nothing. I mean,
Yes. And
is it,
I believe
if it's paid off, do they have to, can they get rid of their paperwork if it's paid off, or do they still need to keep it so we can advise them?
I would keep it because of, situations like that. That's a great example. So what happened is her on this escrow, the seller had paid the solar in full, but the appraiser requested copies of the solar paperwork from the seller. And of course, that means the lender was involved in it. So even though there wasn't an assumption situation, they still wanted that documentation. So that is a great example of a weird situation where you would think it's not going to be a problem. It's paid in full. What's the problem? And then some silly appraiser calls that. So yes, save all of the paperwork. And how did that end? Remind me. Did they end up finding it?
No, but we ended up closing. We were supposed to close early December, and we ended up closing December 27th. So they had to spend Christmas and in an Airbnb with their kids and dogs.
Yeah, it definitely slowed us down for sure.
Oh yeah. Well, plus
Yes.
midstream he switched lenders. And
Yes.
that really threw a monkey wrench. But that appraiser was the appraiser from HE double hockey sticks.
That happens sometimes. So in a normal world where we have solar, there's usually what's called a UCC financing statement, and then oftentimes a contract recorded against the property. These will show up on the prelim, and that is what indicates to me, if no one's already told me, that there's solar on a property. So what we will jump in and do is we'll contact the solar company and we'll let them know that the property is being sold and we want to initiate a transfer. So we'll make that call for you. And the solar companies, generally speaking, will ask for the contact information for the buyer and the seller, and they'll send out their packages of paperwork for the clients to sign. So we'll get the process started, and then they'll usually get a DocuSign package that they need to fill out. And oftentimes, if the buyer is assuming the solar, there's a soft credit check too. So I always like to make sure that the lender is on board with all of this. You never, want to mess up the financing process with this solar. So make sure that the lender knows, what we're doing, and that there's a soft credit check. And then also, if the buyer is assuming the solar, make sure that that's not going to mess up any debt to income ratios. So, when I initiate the transfer, I usually will send out an email to all parties, including the lender, letting the buyer and the seller know what to expect. And then sometimes we'll have to babysit a little bit, them, filling out the paperwork. But again, the sooner the better, because the solar companies can sometimes drag their feet on completing the transfer process. And we need to obtain lien releases for those items that are on the prelim. So we don't ever want to be at the 11th hour ready to close and we're being held up by a solar company. So I always like to jump right on top of that and, kind of be a little professional pest and kind of keep nagging on the buyer and the seller to fill it out, because we just don't want any delays. So in a perfect world, it's recorded against a property on the prelim, and we'll tackle it that way. And of course, like you mentioned, we'll run into things that are uncommon, but that is generally how it's handled. And then sometimes you'll have situations, this is more rare, but if the solar is owned, but maybe not completely paid off by the seller, if the plan is to have the seller pay off the solar through the escrow, of course, we need to know about that, because it's not a transfer situation. We have to order a payoff demand to pay off that lien through escrow. So if that's the situation, of course, we can't tell by the prelim whether it's owned or leased. So if any information you can get from the seller, like I mentioned, the better, because then we can tackle it the right way. Any other questions about crazy solar? It's like the whole thing that I feel like you need a whole person on your transaction just to handle the solar. It's a lot. A lot. Okay. And then the last thing I wanted to go over are supplemental property tax bills. And I kind of, this is such an important thing. And I kind of feel like it just gets overshadowed. So supplemental property tax bills, they've been around actually since 1983. And it is basically a tax bill catching up the old owner's value to the new owner's value. And what happens is the day that a deed records transferring ownership from one party to another, of course, the assessor goes, oh, okay, cool. Now we can reassess this house. So right now, I can only speak for Solano County because that's most of where my business takes place. Solano County is really behind on their supplemental bills. They're taking about 9 months right now to come out. It used to be 6, but they've been really behind. So I always love to make a big deal out of this with buyers. I usually go over it in detail in my signings. Sometimes you will have a mobile notary signing your clients. So I think it's important that you're all aware of this. That way, if you need to jump in, you can. And let them know. This is not a fun surprise. So what happens is that bill gets issued, like I mentioned, 6 to 9 months after close, and it goes to the buyer. And most buyers who obtain financing have an impound or an escrow account, which pay their taxes and insurance with their monthly payment. This supplemental bill is the one and only bill that is not going to automatically go to your client's lender for payment. It's going to go to the buyer and it's their responsibility. So I always like to make a big deal of it because I know if no one told me, I would toss it to the side and say, oh, my lender pays my taxes. I don't have to worry about that. It does become a lien on the property. So it's very important that the buyers are aware that it's coming. And I always suggest making a call to whomever they're making their mortgage payment to, whoever their servicer is. Oftentimes there's excess money in that impound account and it can cover the supplemental bill. You just have to take action. You have to call or they're not going to get that bill. So when the bill comes out, it is payable in 2 equal installments. So of course the buyer can choose to pay it directly, no problem, but why not pay it from the impound account? That's still their money and it's just sitting there. So usually you can call the lender, let them know that the supplemental bill came, and they'll have you fax, email it in, and they're able to take care of it through the impound account. And boom, it's done. If it's not paid, like I said, it will become a lien on the property. And I do see a lot, people that maybe bought a house a year or 2 ago that are now selling. There's delinquent supplemental taxes on their prelim because nobody told them that they were getting this supplemental bill. They just, oh, I thought my lender was paying it. So I always like to make a big fuss about it. And something cool that I wanted to share with you, of course, you can call your escrow officer and we can kind of do our best estimate on what the supplemental bill is going to be. We can look at the current assessed value. We can take what you're purchasing it for or your buyer's purchasing it for and kind of do a rough estimate. But if you're ever in a pickle, Property ID, on their website, they have a supplemental property tax calculator and it's super easy to use. You just, pop in the current assessed value, which you can find on the tax collector website, the new purchase price and a couple of dates and things, and boom, it'll estimate it for you. And that way your buyers know what to expect. If you're dealing with someone that's buying new construction, their supplemental bills are usually pretty hefty because at the time of sale, the property is usually just assessed on the land. So the taxes are very, very low. And then there's a big, beautiful mansion built on that land. And then it's reassessed. So you can imagine that those bills are usually pretty hefty. So something to keep in mind, there's so many new builds, so many beautiful houses right now. So definitely something to make a big deal of. Amy, do you have a question?
Yes, I was just going to say on the Property ID website, it's fabulous. And I talk about it all the time. If you register for a free account with Property ID, then you don't even have to look up the assessed value. You can just search by the property address and then put in the purchase price and the close of escrow date, and it will pull all the information over for you.
Oh, cool. So you use it too. I just found out about it like not too long ago, and I think it's so cool.
Yes, it's fabulous. It's a great service that Property ID offers.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I'm glad you use it. That's awesome. And I didn't know that about just putting the property address in. That's even better.
Yeah. So create the free account and then go there and then you can search by property address.
Awesome. Sweet. Yes. Ashley has a question.
I have a question. If they send their supplemental bill to their lender to possibly see if they have excess funds, if they don't have the whole amount, will the lender pay what they can and then they pay the rest?
Great question. The lender will pay the entire bill. You may go negative in your impound account, so it will raise their monthly payment. I mean, it's a small amount because imagine they're dividing that up over whatever the shortage is over 12 months. So usually they'll cover it because the lender they want to make sure the taxes are paid. They want to be in first lien position. They don't want a tax lien against a property that they have a loan against. So yes, they will pay it, and then they'll just, if it's short, they'll bump the monthly payment up a few bucks to cover the shortage until it's all caught up.
Got it.
Good question. Good question. Any other questions? I feel like I'm just talking your ears off.
I have a little story time if anybody wants to hear it. That just happened to me, and I thought it was so crazy. I was getting
I have one quick question. Sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you, beautiful.
no, go ahead.
So I always pay extra on my mortgage payment, and they were switching companies on me. And then all of a sudden, right before they switched, they raised my payment saying that my impound account was short. And I was just like, there's no way. So how does that, why do they do that, first of all?
Did you purchase pretty recently?
2017 we purchased.
And
you were my
they did that
escrow officer
in 2017?
I can answer that. So Anastasia, what happened was, even though you're making an extra payment, that extra payment goes to your principal balance, not to your escrow or to interest or anything. So it's paying off your principal. And each year your assessment goes up just a little bit. So, right. So it incrementally creeps up just a little bit each year. So what's probably happened is, since you've bought in 2017, you've gone up enough now that your escrow, your impound account isn't enough to cover it. And your insurance also has probably gone up. And so usually once a year, your mortgage company is going to review that impound account, like was mentioned, and then they adjust your payment accordingly to make up for any shortfall and to make sure that you're covered moving forward. So every few years, your payment is going to adjust, because your insurance with most people has gone up a little bit, and your property taxes as well likely gone up enough that it triggered it to be short.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you so much.
No problem. Good.
We want to hear your story.
Oh, my story.
Yeah.
Okay. So I have my escrow account set up, right, for my mortgage, and my loan has been sold many, many times, and I've never had to like worry about it. It's just kind of seamless. It gets transferred to a new servicer. You know, you get the new information, you make your mortgage payment to the new servicer, whatever. Well, then I started getting letters in the mail saying that my insurance wasn't being paid, and they put like a first insurance policy on my account. So then my escrow account was short like $2,000 or something. So long story servicer, I didn't know it was my responsibility. You have to call your insurance company and make sure that they have the new mortgage clause and everything, because they were just not getting paid. It was this whole ordeal. I don't know if my mortgage company, my servicer, is just the worst, but it was like months of a whole fight of this insurance.
Yes, and
So
I guess insurance is expensive.
I guess the moral of the story is, if you or your client's loan ever gets transferred, just give a call to your insurance company and make sure that they have all the correct information.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Fascinating.
I know. It's a nightmare.
And that's good to know, because most people will think, oh, they're automatically going to do it. I don't have to worry about nothing.
Exactly. That's what I think every time, because it's just, it's normally just a seamless thing, but not this time.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any questions? Do you have, like, it doesn't even have to be related to this. Do you have any escrow questions in general?
Yeah, any funky scenarios, anything? It's crazy right now. Everything's a little bit harder.
Wait, I have a question about that story. So were you paying, did your mortgage payment change when they switched companies? Or was your company still paying the same home insurance? Or your lender still paying the same home insurance? Or or not, or how did that get paid? Did you have to pay for those $2,000 out of pocket?
No, so the shortage came.
the shortage came.
Oh, it's echoing again.
Are you guys hearing an echo?
I think it's better now.
Okay, sorry. So the shortage from my escrow account came from them placing a forced insurance policy. So once I contacted my insurance company and they were able to send, you know, the current policy declaration page and whatnot showing that I do have a policy in place, they were able to like get rid of the forced policy, and they had to do an escrow analysis, and it all went back to normal. But for a short time, it did show that my payment was going to go up significantly because of the shortage in my escrow account. Does that answer your question? Hello?
She's on mute.
Are we frozen?
No.
I can hear
Sorry,
you.
I thought I was. Sorry, I thought I was unmuted.
Oh,
Yes, my question. I was asking because our mortgage loan was sold like 6 months ago, and I haven't contacted my home insurance. So now I'm like, oh, hope that doesn't happen.
yeah.
again.
Normally, I mean, my loan is many times before, and I've never had to reach out to my insurance company, but this time it's a one-off kind of thing. But it wouldn't hurt to check with them.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing.
Wobbly again. We're hearing an echo.
Yeah, I was hearing it briefly. It seems to have cleared up now.
Well, any questions or anything else we can go over for you, or?
I'll email you ladies. I know most of you already have our information and Chrissy's information, but I'll shoot you an email. That way you have us handy. If you do think of anything once we get off this call, you can just easily ask us. And yeah,
We'll include a little literature about solar and supplemental taxes. That way you just have it on hand in case you want to include it in your listing packages or for your buyers. We'll attach that to the email too.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for having us.
Thank you,
Yeah,
ladies.
thanks for joining us
Thank
today. I
you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we'll get you guys back on the calendar next month.
All right, ladies,
for
we'll have a
mobile-
wonderful day. Yes, we will coordinate that. And Anastasia, I know you said you were showing some mobile homes. Don't forget, we have a mobile home escrow officer in Vacaville for you.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Yes,
All right,
thank
ladies.
you.
Well, have a good day. We'll talk soon.